Y'all are probably all aware by now about how AMD is possibly blocking DLSS in AMD sponsored games. And at this point in time, they're looking pretty guilty because they don't want to respawn. If you have one of these technologies in a game, it's decently easy to integrate the other ones into it as well. So this just looks worse and worse for AMD with their sponsored titles. But is that drama from AMD really any worse than what Nvidia is doing at this current moment? Okay, Nvidia is allegedly threatening supply limits or even bans for Chinese AIB partners planning to launch Intel Battlemage GPUs. Possibly, Intel is threatening its board partners that are thinking about working with Intel. We aren't going to sell you our GPUs anymore. And this is a very scary thing from Nvidia to tell their board partners, because if they don't get chips from Nvidia, they don't make nearly as much money. This is actually a threat to them. I think Nvidia is completely aware that Intel is a threat in this market. Down here, the Q1 report from JPR indicates single-digit market share from Intel Arc GPUs. But those numbers may eclipse what AMD has in the market share by that year's end if the current rate of adoption continues. As you can see, AMD is hovering around 12% and Intel around 4% of the market share. Intel, even though they're new to graphics, have been making integrated graphics on their CPUs for years and years. I'm sure many of you have played with Intel UHD graphics on a laptop or something like that. And they're a multi-billion-dollar company just like all of these other ones. Like, Intel can really throw in this market if they're given the chance, especially also because Intel GPUs are focusing on ray tracing and AI performance, and their upscaler is better than FSR. Genuinely, it competes toe-to-toe with a lot of Nvidia's features on their GPUs. Intel is kind of doing well. The Arc A750 has gone as low as $180, and that is competing directly with AMD's entry-level RX 6600 budget option at about $190. And I think at that price point, the Arc A750 is actually a really good deal. And a lot of you should maybe consider getting this GPU. And on top of that, the A770 16GB model, the one that you probably should be buying, the 8GB version of the 770, isn't that much faster than the 750. So if you are going to buy the 770, get the 16GB one. It's the one that's actually worth it. We've seen this GPU as low as $281. There are no GPUs in the $300 like price class that have 16GB of VRAM. I actually just finished up 30 days of only using the Arc A770 16GB graphics card, and I was pretty pleased with it, and I didn't run into that many issues. But Intel still has some ways to go with their drivers, and after making that video, which is kind of funny, Intel reposted my video on their Intel graphics channel, so interesting to see that. But on top of that, it saw that they noticed and they saw feedback from the community. And then Intel reached out to me directly, and we had a little conversation talking about what Intel graphics in the future drivers can improve on. They actually saw the things that I reported in my video and wanted to fix them, and they are taking feedback from the community, which shows that they are listening, obviously, as they should. But I want to say that they did take the feedback and they are going to integrate it into their future drivers. And I like to see a company actually wanting to improve their stuff. But you might be thinking, like, why does it even matter if Intel works with board partners at all? Like, it's okay. They've worked with Sparkle. They've worked with ASRock. Acer just started making GPUs as well, and Intel has worked with Acer. Well, in my opinion, if you work with a company like Asus or MSI or Gigabyte, even though Gigabyte had a drama really silly, it shows that those AIBs are willing to invest into Intel's GPUs, which validates them to people, but it wouldn't guarantee them instant growth or anything. And I think even with the board partners that they have right now, eventually Intel could still get there. It would just delay them significantly if they can't work with more trusted board partners. And there was a Reddit thread that went into more in depth on this, and somebody in the comments, you don't get 80% plus of the market share without doing some shady dealing. Intel is also no stranger to doing the same type of shady dealing. This guy says it's time to bust out the $2 billion backroom incentive for AIBs to sell to Intel instead, because Intel has the money. Okay, they can pay off AIBs and possibly still get their cards to work with them in the end of things. But with other Nvidia news, the 16 gigabyte version of the 4060 Ti, as you guys know, is launching on July 18th. And currently it is July 17th. And there are no reviews out. This card doesn't look like it's going to be the best performer because it's going to cost $500 instead of the 4060 Ti, which launched at $400. And the only difference between these cards is the memory. It has 16 gigabytes, but it has the same 128-bit bus, which is slow memory at 288 gigabytes per second. This card is going to be competing with AMD's 6800 XT at $510, basically the same price, which has 16 gigabytes of memory, which has almost double the memory bandwidth. And because this is basically going to be the same card as the 4060 Ti, as we just mentioned, if you judge by this relative performance chart on Tech PowerUp, the 6800 XT down here is 100%, and the 4060 Ti is at about 76% of the 6800 XT at the same price. They use more power with the 6800 XT, so the 4060 Ti would be more power efficient, and you get frame generation and AV1 encoding. But for a lot of people, those things don't matter a whole lot. And the fact that you have 16 gigabytes of memory on this card, but it's so slow that in areas where you'd want to use it, you would want more VRAM as you climb in resolution, like to 1440p and to 4K. But that memory is so slow that it might not even matter with the performance gains. This was the whole shtick of why the 4060 Ti compared so closely to the 3060 Ti, especially as you went up in resolution to 1440p. These were almost the same graphics card, and that's because the 3060 Ti has an increased memory bandwidth. That's why the 4060 Ti was reviewed so poorly. Gamers Nexus says it was a waste of sand. Hardware Unboxed said it is laughably bad at $400. So think how laughable the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte, which is basically the same card, is gonna be at $500. It is going to be terrible. And that's exactly why we're not going to be seeing this card. Even though it's going to be releasing on the 18th, you would think you would see reviews going up on the 17th or something to hype people up because it's such a cool card and everything. It doesn't seem like there's going to be an official review program for the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte. And this can kind of be confirmed by Gamers Nexus here. And this video was on the 12th. So this is actually when they probably would have been communicating with Nvidia to get a review sample to start testing.
We don't know if Nvidia is going to be sampling the media with this one. My suspicion is no. Maybe they'll prove us wrong. That'd be nice. But it seems like they look at the 4060 Ti reviews where the card was universally hated, and they'll say, maybe we'll just kind of silently let this one hit the market and hope that the reviews are delayed enough that people buy it before they see one.
So they might be trying to silently launch this graphics card to act like nobody noticed it. And if a reviewer wants to review it, one, they have to buy it, and two, it's delayed after the launch. They don't get to release a review before the product goes out. You know, their review isn't going to be as effective for anybody who wants to buy it day one. But Steve, second Steve from Hardware Unboxed in the tech community, also said there is no official review program for this model, and every Nvidia partner that they had spoken to won't be providing review samples, and they're not even sure when their models will be available. This review sample issue, I think, actually has two levels to it, like huge 4D chess kind of stuff. In one instance, they don't want to get bad reviews on the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte because, like, dude, we got foresight. We know exactly what's going to happen. We read this like a book, like the multiverse of madness. This is going to be a terrible launch from Nvidia, and Nvidia wants to act like it isn't going to happen and that they didn't make a mistake when everybody and their grandma knows that they did. So in one aspect, they're trying to hide reviews. And another aspect is I think this card is actually going to sell so poorly that it might not even be profitable for them to do the partner review program. because they have to send graphics cards out to these reviewers. If they send them to the reviewers, that costs money. That actually eats into their sales. So if they send a card out, how are they going to support how little cards they're actually going to sell? We saw how the 4060 went. Only one person waited to get the 4060 in Japan. Nvidia might not be able to even afford the review program. These sales are looking so bad right now. And we've seen like the 4060 has 16 gigabyte. This is going to be terrible. Not only did I say like, oh, it's like the extra RAM might not even matter because it's so slow, but there might be models like the Asus Strix one might reach the price of an RTX 4070, a 4070 which you should freaking go for instead of the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte. They just want to act like this graphics card isn't going to happen and create it as an upsell to get the 4070 instead. But that's not even saying that the 4070 is actually good value at that price point. It's just saying in comparison to the other options on the market, you should get the 4070 instead. They're trying to play like games with us right now, and it is not. I'm hoping it doesn't work on people, because the 4070 isn't good. The 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte is terrible at that price point. Not to mention the 4060 Ti, just judging about how bad that product was and how bad the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte is. The 8 gigabyte one, we've already seen, what, a couple months after launch now, has it been? It's already gone down to $334, and this card started at $400. At $334, it's actually not that bad of a deal. This was kind of a flash sale though, but we might see it go down in price in the future. But Nvidia's cards tend to not mess with their MSRP as much as what AMD does. And speaking of AMD, but not AMD CPUs, just onto some more news here. AMD had an interesting conversation and an interview where they talked about Zen 5. As you know, we're on Zen 4 right now. So this generation would be coming out in a year, maybe 2 years at max. AMD said that they won't follow Intel's performance core and their efficiency core hybrid approach to their CPUs. As many of you probably know, Intel does have two types of cores in their chips. And one of them is a performance card indicated by the little P, and then the other one is an efficiency core indicated by the little E. And the performance cores use more power. They're dedicated for higher priority tasks on your system. And then efficiency cores are meant to do the background task that if a performance core got caught up on doing, then it would be wasting its time. So the efficiency cores are meant to handle those processes and then keep everything running smooth on the front end. And AMD did discuss this here, and they actually already have two types of Zen 4 cores. Zen 4 is the current generation we're on. The standard Zen 4 core and the density optimized Zen 4 core C. Okay, so the C indicates these ones. I'm not exactly sure where they're using Zen 4C right now, and you guys would have to tell me in the comments where they actually are. They did say that there is one way of them doing the hybrid P core and E core route, but it isn't what AMD is planning on doing at the current moment. And the rationale for not doing that is actually having two different cores creates different compatibilities, and it's harder to fine tune the software and OS. When Intel made their performance cores and their efficiency cores, Intel worked very closely with Microsoft and Windows in order to integrate them into the operating system. But AMD would have to do the same thing. That takes a lot of skill, a lot of expertise, and a lot of investment time. But it seems like AMD is going to take a different approach to this. I do find very interesting. We'll see how AMD's CPUs progress into the future, because over the years, Ryzen has stayed relatively the same. They've had their core clusters and their CCDs, and then run basically just performance cores all the way through. What is AMD going to do to progress their CPUs? Because that architecture and that design can only take them so far into the future. In other news, Microsoft did beat the Federal Trade Commission in their request for preliminary injunction to block Activision Blizzard deal. So FTC was trying to stop this, possibly saying that it was a monopoly, and for Microsoft to acquire Activision and Blizzard. It seems like Microsoft actually won this in court. And that means that the Activision Blizzard acquisition can continue forward. And I think in the grand scheme of things, this is good for gamers. You know, Microsoft, at least for one instance, has Xbox Game Pass. It's about a $10 subscription, which gives you access to many games on a monthly subscription. And you just get to try them out. You don't have to commit to buying things. And I think it's a super cool system. And I'm thinking about getting it pretty soon. Anyways, Microsoft does actually get Activision Blizzard, then they'll be able to put Activision Blizzard games on Game Pass possibly, and that just means more for us. Then on top of that, it seems like Microsoft treats their studios better. As you know, Bethesda is owned by Microsoft now. Microsoft acquired Bethesda. Starfield was already in production, so they would launch Starfield, which is a big game releasing in September now. When Microsoft actually acquired them, they wanted to have a big game coming out. But Microsoft actually told them to delay it, wait for it to be in the best state possible to fix bugs and get a better AAA release. And as you know, a lot of AAA games have been bad lately, and I'm not putting a lot of faith into Starfield that is going to be any better. But at the very least, maybe we won't see an apology from Bethesda a few days after launch. It seems like Xbox actually has possibly the best interest of the games at heart, and wants people to experience them in their best form instead of rushing a game out the door just to make money like a lot of other AAA games have done. And this type of strategy was even seen with Redfall, which is another Bethesda game. And it seemed like how Redfall was going is that it was actually going to be a very big money maker, like if the game wasn't total crap. Paired with games that Bethesda has been releasing that are supposed to make more money, like Fallout 76, they pumped up the value of their company before Microsoft bought them. It's just like a whole corporate bullshit, but it's just how the world works. And I kind of feel like that's what we have been seeing with Activision Blizzard in these past few years, as they've been thinking, oh, we're going to get acquired by Microsoft, that this deal is happening. They've been trying to push out like live service games, say like Overwatch 2, or which they've really messed up, but they did like Diablo Immortal, they've done like Warzone, like a lot of games that make a ton of money for the company. Maybe with Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard, maybe we'll stop seeing all the bad games that they've been putting out recently and maybe seeing some more fun ones for the community. And it does seem like, at least to me, that Sony is scared of this because they're investing more, the record amount into game development, and aims to spend 2/3 of it on live service by 2025, which live service games make them a lot of money. Okay, we'll see what happens. It's going to be more competition. I'm not exactly mad about it. I think it's actually good for us because Sony owns a majority of the market anyways in consoles, and they make a ton of money on their games. They put out games like God of War, they put out games like Horizon Zero Dawn and Last of Us and Spider-Man, and I just saw the new Spider-Verse movie. Sony made that as well. Like, oh my god, that movie is amazing. Another Sony exclusive game, Ratchet and Clank, is releasing on PC as they continue their trend about releasing all their games on PC. It's going to be one of the first games with direct storage on PC, which is awesome to see. If you guys aren't aware of what direct storage is, it's when your storage device can communicate and send data directly to the GPU instead of going through the CPU. And logically, this can speed up loading times, and the CPU doesn't have to work as hard just managing data. As games get bigger and bigger, your CPU actually has to work harder and harder just to manage all the massive amount of data as it needs to get to your GPU. So if we can streamline that process in the grand scheme of things, eventually it should be better. As we know, a lot of games have been CPU bound lately as the bottleneck. Hopefully we can start to avoid that. But if you do take away that processing power, so this has been holding up a lot of studios with direct storage, is your GPU needs to decompress the files. So it's possible, and we'll have to see how this goes, but this might be heavier on your GPU than it is your CPU. But what's really interesting with this game is it doesn't seem with direct storage that you need an SSD. Obviously, I don't think you're going to be seeing the best speeds without an SSD. Speaking of GPU performance and stuff, this game isn't overly demanding, which is really cool to see from a AAA game coming out in 2023. But at 720p 30 FPS on the very low preset, you only need a GTX 960 or an RX 470. At 1080p 60 on the medium preset, you need a GTX or an RTX 2060 or a Radeon 5700. And if you want to play at high, 1440p at 60 FPS or 4K at 30 FPS, you get a 3060 Ti or an RX 6800. I do think an RX 6800 is faster than this 3060 Ti, and it has more VRAM. So that's maybe a bit of a bad comparison there. And then if you want to play ray tracing at 1440p 60 FPS, then you need an RTX 3070 or a 6800 XT. I think that's reasonable. 4K ultimate, so 60 FPS is basically maxed out at 4K. Obviously things scale up very quickly as you go up to 4K and you're maxing out ray tracing in the game. You need an RTX 4080 or a 7900 XTX, and I don't think these requirements are overly like dashing or anything. I don't think this blocks people from playing it. A lot of AAA games lately, like say like Immortals of Avium or Jedi Survivors, have put a lot of demands on these systems, and they aren't even that much better on console. And it's good to see that a game is coming out and it isn't out of the range for a lot of people to play. This game was made by Insomniac, and then the port to PC is being done by Nixxes, which is, these are the same two companies that did the Spider-Man games and the Spider-Man ports. And the same company that we did mention earlier on, that Nixxes says that if you have FSR in a game, that DLSS and XeSS, or if you have any one of these technologies, once you have one, that they're pretty easy to implement once that's the case. So in Ratchet and Clank, even though you might want to play at these higher settings, you probably will have access to every upscaler in this game. So that is cool to see for people. So you can use the best one for your GPU. So it is cool to see, and Nixxes is doing a good job. So which drama is worse? AMD possibly blocking DLSS and XeSS in their sponsored titles, or Nvidia possibly blocking AIB partners from working with Intel directly because they see Intel's GPUs as a threat? You tell me what you think in the comments below. Me personally, I think that Nvidia blocking AIBs is way more destructive and anti-competitive than blocking upscalers, because this, like, Intel is genuinely a player in this game, and this will definitely slow down their progression if they can't work with AIB partners. But it just might end up that Intel just needs to pay a little bit more money behind the scenes to get that done. On top of that, with more Nvidia drama, the 4060 Ti 16GB model is going to be terrible, and it's so bad that it seems like they want to just sneak it under the rug and like, hey, like, this didn't happen. Like, hey, we're Nvidia, we're the cool guys, and we make awesome products all the time. And then in other news, it's cool to see what the future is going to be for AMD Ryzen as it moves on onto the AM5 platform in the future. And on top of that, Microsoft might be acquiring Activision Blizzard finally. Okay, this deal has been cooking forever, and it might be burnt by now, but it's still been cooking, and I think overall this is going to be a good thing for gamers. Hopefully Microsoft doesn't do anything bad with it, and we can't guarantee that. But Microsoft has genuinely usually been in the same eyes as gamers, so we'll see how it goes in the future. You know, just crossing our fingers that it works out. It's also super cool to see Ratchet and Clank releasing with direct storage on PC. Really want to see this technology progress, and I'm excited to see maybe it'll lessen the load on CPUs in the future, and also possibly cut down loading times. Like, it just seems like a good move overall, but we'll see how much of an impact it has on the GPU, because all that processing that is decompressing all the files gets moved to the GPU instead of the CPU. But that's basically been it for all this news today. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Shout out to everybody who is subscribed, and you all have a good one. Peace out.